It is being recorded, so somebody. Okay, so everybody, wait, does this gentleman? All right. Do another one in between, but I think this one makes the most sense. So what I'm going to do. So we're going to do. And then we're going to do this. There's one and then iteration called learning and all right, but not everybody might have. I have extra copies. If you don't have, there's one. Yeah, I gave it out last since we never got to it. I don't know. Yeah, of course. Development. Right. I don't think I have. Okay. All right. Right. We're talking. That's how I always word it. I didn't know about the lobsters or whatever it's called. So after. You're not talking about the box. No, we finished that last week. Okay. And I don't think. So you don't have the chemical for lands. But so you need an extra, just a second. Learning. Oh, yeah. I do have it. Okay. I have one extra. I'm just going to leave it. Where's Barbara? Okay. Okay. Oh, good. My friend Irene is here. Great.
Yes,
So,
Malka, if you
okay.
face,
Can
I
you see me?
I can hear you when you face the microphone, but when you turn around, I can't.
Oh, then you can. Well, I'll do the best I can. All right.
Okay.
I remember my son, when there was COVID going around and he had to teach, but some kids did come to school, but some, stayed at home. He said he found it very difficult. Yeah.
It's hard when you're doing both.
I mean, you know what? I have to send you some of the sheets, so you'll just listen, right?
I will listen, no problem.
And then when I get home later, I'll.
Okay. Very good.
First, I need my reading glasses. I know them.
Okay, let me mute.
Mondays we do like a Navi on Malachim back. So they told me I look very professorial. So. Oh, good. You are here. So just there's some extra sheets here. Barbara, hold on. Let me just, I'll be right back. Okay, before I start doing anything dealing with Jewish education and the great Rabbanim, from this time period, I want you to give a bit more information on that Council of Four Lands, Aratzot. That's what I have to tell you. When I went to high school, I went to Manhattan Central. All your Jewish subjects were in Hebrew, completely, and your texts were completely, in Hebrew. So, so I look at Council of Four Lands because I always knew it as about our Bahara. So I don't know. Did any of you go to high school? So you don't know. But it's not so easy. So thank God there weren't so many Jewish history books. So I got a copy of Heinrich Retz's History of the Jews, like a 6-volume work. The German Jew, one of the foremost Jewish historians. But what did he had Chassidus? So if you could tell from his comment. So I used to borrow it with my father. So I would borrow a volume so I could read something in English. So I could follow. All right. So we're going to do again a little bit more about this organization. This was how the Jews organized themselves. They had great autonomy, which again was one of the, I would say, in addition to the fact that there was this charter guaranteeing their safety, that the king had issued. But he allowed them to live their own personal lives any way they wished, have their own personal leaders, have their own courts of law, and he didn't care. long as you pay them taxes. Okay. So I just wanted to give you a little bit more information. And it's funny, I prepared this sheet and then I'm doing some more research. And then I found more information. So some more of the information I'll just add on to what you actually have on the sheets. Okay. So you'll listen in, Irene, okay, and the rest of you can follow, along on the sheets. All right. By the 16th century, the Jews of Poland had forged for themselves a well-organized government. Remember, I told you they started coming 14th and 15th centuries in greater numbers. So by this time, that the early 1500s, that's the 16th century, there already is I don't have exact figures for how many people were living there, but I'm sure there were at least 100,000. That's how many that had come, and primarily they're coming eastward. In fact, the Polish government encouraged them to do this, primarily because, again, as I mentioned, it made the collection of taxes much easier. You could go to this one council, which represented the Jews from the entire provinces of Poland, say, I want, a million. I don't know what the currency is in Poland. Is that silver or that's some other country? In any case, zlotys. Okay, I want a million zlotys. That's where you get it from. But by March 15th, the money to be delivered, to me, and they did. So they took care of it. As for the Jews, though, right, our fringe benefit, it afforded them a convenient union of all their communities. So if there any issues, that came up, this would be religious issues as well as secular issues. And they needed to discuss. Everyone needed to decide. You would go to the council, VOD, and the VOD would, make the decision. If it was obviously a religious matter, if it's not did, and then everybody had to follow it. Unity helped to safeguard their common interests and protect against their enemies. Additionally, the rabbinic leaders of Polish Jewry saw cultural advantages to this organization, and it gave them an opportunity for the wider application of Jewish law. So again, there would be this one central authority that would be the ones making the final decisions whenever halachic issue came up, right? And I would say from the perspective of the VOD of our own, that was, what they considered their primary role, right? To guide, the people in matters of religious law. Obviously, they had to be bidding the king and collect the taxes. But for them, the most important thing, right, was to be there, as a central point. Otherwise, as you know, any other place you would hear, America, we don't no longer have, or we don't have a Sanhedrin. The council sort of served what a Sanhedrin would have done from going back, years in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Shalom Shachman, I'm going to give you a lot more information about this Rav. He was a key Rav from this early 16th century who guided the museum. Powerful figure, as you find out. But right now, just know him, think of him in this very positive light. He was one of those key people who wanted his body to be established. He was a rabbi of Lublin. All right, he gave definite form to the idea of an intercommunal union. As I say, he was a very learned person. People respected him. People from all over Poland, even other countries, would turn to him as like a supreme guide for Jewish halacha. Okay, and so around that year 1530, that's when this Ba'ad. When I saw in another case, somebody I saw the actual year 1533. That's when that Ba'ad came into being. The king at that time was this King Sigismund. So he was born in 1467 and he died in 1548. He was actually the king from 1506 to 1548. Okay. The lands under Polish rule were divided into three districts. There were three, there were five, there were four. That's what's called Arba, four. so it eventually became 4 different provinces. Poland proper, well, what that means, Poland proper, or whatever. Polish, Russia. In other words, there was the area around Lublin, obviously, that's called Silesia. That was the one closest to Germany. Right? So obviously they spoke German and Polish in Lublin. Then there was the area around Krakow. Then there was the area further south at Ruthenia that where Galicia came to be, right? And then more to the east, an area called Bohemia. What pronouncing it properly? Okay. The Jews of these provinces joined together into one council. A little less than a century later, in 1623, the Jews of Lithuania withdrew. At one point, Lithuania was part of 5 members of this council. They formed a council of their own, and the impetus for this was that the government had begun to impose a separate tax on it. So they could it. It didn't matter. First of all, and the Rabbanim and many of them not really giants, until learning. So for that purpose, they could have had their own council. As I said, the impetus was because of taxation. It started with Jagiellon. He was like the first. I don't know, it's Jagiellon. I don't know. King of this Jagiellon dynasty. The Sigmund one was one of, his descendants. Now they sort of had like 2 titles, the kings. They were the king of Poland and the Duke of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. That's how. So, but it was this one huge country, Poland / Lithuania. The Polish Jewish Council was then recognized, was then reorganized. We just talked about them. I'm not going to go over that. The area would have had its own local council, but then you would send representatives to, well, where did they meet? Started off in Lublin, and that's where this one overall God, would meet to consult and make various decisions. This I found interesting. So they each had a separate council, and they chose representatives to the council for this. The general council consisted usually of 30 men. So which is a huge number. Even Sanhedrin had 70, right, 71 plus. But they had 30 men, and that went semi-annually twice a year, unless an emergency demanded an extra session. So these representatives are called parnasim. And they would meet at the times when they had these huge trade fairs, actually even earlier in the Middle Ages. Very often, merchants, from all over would go to these trade fairs, but it also became a nice central point where different Rabbanim or scholars, halacha would meet again to make determinations of, what the final law should be, halacha law should be. So the first one was established, obviously, this Rabbi Shachman of Lublin, so it was in Lublin. And their main trade fair was actually in the springtime, and that's where they would meet. And so it was around the time between Purim and Pesach when they would have that. Later on, as first of all, Jews spread out in different areas, so then they felt it was needed, well, can't just meet once a year to decide certain important things. So then they opened up one in Yaroslav, and that was called the autumnal trade fair, and that was usually between Av and Elul. I mean, it couldn't be obviously Tishrei. I mean, so they had to meet, but it worked out because there was a trade fair in Yaroslav, so they met there as well. To make sure the matters of business and finance remained in experienced hands, the number of rabbis in the council was limited to 6. So note, it was mostly the leaders were mostly people secular. I don't mean that they weren't religious; they were all Jews, but they weren't necessarily rabbanim. But 6 of them, were always had to be rabbanim. The head of the council was always a layman and was a much smaller. So it makes me think of what we have nowadays, like the Jewish Community Federation, right? And that they would be the spokesperson for Jews whenever issues, arise that affect us. This head was in effect the head of the entire Jewish community of Poland. Man, do we really have anybody like that? Oh, I don't know. I mean, you have certain key organizations, right? That speak up on our behalf, anti-Semitism. And but we're pretty fragmented. I mean, there are certain issues, yeah. And there's certainly no one halachic head anymore. You sort of follow whatever wrong you accept as being your authority. Whatever he might say. You follow. There were always two standing committees. One was headed by a rabbi, which dealt with matters of culture and Jewish law, right? Basically, how halachic things, issues would arise and how to treat a particular issue. So, again, this was a standing committee that the rabbanim would meet, and they would make the pesach to how to deal with certain halachic issue. There was another one headed by a layman, and that concerned with the matters of nation. Special committees, we're on page 2, okay. Special committees were also convened when other matters of interest in all of Polish Jewry arose from time to time, right? And that's the case always. There always are things, problems, we have to deal with. One result of this nationwide unity and of the peculiar position of the Jewish group within the Jewish state was the appearance of the Stadlan. It's interesting. He was, so to speak, the official ambassador, of the Jews. And the word Stadlan is from Lahish Tadel, to try, because again, he was represented. He would speak up on behalf of people, matters vis-a-vis the government, vis-a-vis the king, the diet, the Polish parliament, Polish Congress. Again, he's considered to be an official ambassador of the Jews. He was appointed by the council and responsible to it. However, the Stadlan had no official standing at the Polish court. I've seen him in the next paragraph. I'll mention this. He was sort of seen as this like a lobbyist, who would be around, speak up when the issues concerning the Jewish community came up. So again, it's not a governmental position, but he was recognized as a I give him certain honor, to represent the Jews. I mean, even from the people or the diet position, this Stadlan, he would speak up. They knew that he was representing all of Polish Jewry. Okay, the Stadlan had no official standing. Okay, knowing full well that powerful enemies were ready to seize every opportunity to hurt Jewish interests, the council would engage the services of a Jew. This is the Stadlan. His duty it was to live in the capital and to guard the welfare of his people. So then I go to the capital of Poland. Right, okay. So Krakow, wait, I gotta get this. Crazy. Wait, I can no glasses again. Krakow was the capital of Poland from 1038, long time ago, 1038 to 1596. But after that, starting in 1596 up until 1795, Warsaw was, and of course it is again the capital today. But in 1795, Poland became kaput because it was divided into 3 parts. The eastern part went to Russia, the southern part went to Hungary, and part of the would have gone to Germany. Poland no longer existed as an independent state. I mentioned once before, it only became an independent state again after World War I. Okay. Um, let's go on. Okay, so a little bit more about Stadtland. He had to possess definite qualifications, good manners. Right, if you're going to, we had to dress properly with the court, of an official representative. Thorough knowledge of the Polish language. I can't bring your Yiddish and start talking about it. Yeah, I had to know Polish. Wide acquaintance with among the Polish nobility. You had to be, good terms with important people. The ability to judge human nature and to use the art of diplomacy. So I sort of always think, like Rabbi Stack, didn't he always sound so good? Magnificent commander of the English China. He's very, individual, but he spoke so well. I was like, no, you are, no, he didn't go there until he was in his 30s. My kids here, in America, they can't wait to hear my little grandson. He's been close to 1 to hear. Right now. Well, first of all, he's baby talk. But it won't be till he actually goes like to a bona fide university school, and then he'll talk different Italian. It just looks like his parents, so it has an American English, but so they can't wait to hear a person to walk around like a proper Englishman. Okay. But you can understand, somebody who's representative is to sound the part and dress the part, and you need those skills, not everybody can be the different personality, to be a diplomat. Okay. Didn't you love Abba Eban also? That's so great. All right. Every meeting of the Polish Parliament was a critical time for the Jews of Poland. If you need anything, there's a new one. I did one on there on the table. The combination of the lesser nobility. Remember, these are the people who had really lost a lot of their lands. So Poland at this point is being taken over by certain key, very, very wealthy, and they were often absent. But they're all were these lesser noblemen, but who they were rather resentful, but lost, their lands. The middle class. Okay. Now, when I say the middle class, obviously, besides the Jews, remember I told you the German middle class, people from Germany who would come in and settle there. That's why, like Hitler always said when he came into Poland, well, first it started with the Sudetenland because there was German, Czechoslovakia, but then Poland, there were some people who still had ties to Germany. And the lower clergy, where they were, so this combination of those three groups, right, was too powerful to be disregarded. But again, this diplomat had to deal with all these rather disgruntled individuals, and to make and again, as spokesperson of the Jewish community, to make sure that anything in the laws that they might pass would, pro right, the Jews, the lands. At such times, Stadtland had to be on hand to visit people privately. That's like the lobbyist does that. And by an appeal to reason and justice, where you have to sound good, to turn them from enemies to good, if temporary friends. I mean, Poles never loved us, but they tolerated us. And the king, they wanted us to income, just coffers. Okay. When he failed to prevent the passage of an anti-Jewish measure, he would exert himself to persuade the Polish king to temper its severity. So we always had like a fire party, even in Germany, the various dukes, would constantly, expel the Jews or put out limitations on their living conditions. So then they would go to the Holy Roman Empire, which sometimes was on it, sometimes was not. Jussie was a backdoor diplomat or lobbyist. So it's a very important thing. I don't know if we have names that have come back. There is, they did leave a record, of their various meetings. I mean, the council, the VOD, is full of Pinkus, you know, sort of like a diary, of what was going on, decisions, that have would. So perhaps I don't know where these things would even be stored nowadays. You know, God knows, perhaps everything, World War II. But it was known that this Pincus, this, like, so to speak, a diary did exist, in which they would have kept records of any important things and perhaps names of individuals. The council also served as a final court of appeals, is a very important position. Disputes between individual Jews could be settled initially in local Jewish courts. It just reminds me just how Moshe Rabbeinu set up, right, all those courts, so there always were lower courts. You have a dispute with somebody, so you go to court, to make, determine who's right and who's wrong. Okay. When disputes lingered, though, higher courts also existed, consisting of men more learned in Jewish law. However, disagreements between individuals and community, so these were different types of arguments that would have ensued, and quarrels between two communities had to be taken directly to the council. These were more problematic issues, and local court couldn't make the decision. It had to go to this overall, like, Supreme Court. The most common causes for such lawsuits were the taxes imposed upon various individual communities. Every large community desired to extend its power over as many smaller ones in its neighborhood as possible. So let's say Lublin. So that, every small little town, they would have, and as issues were came on a higher level, you would go to that major town, right? And then if disputes still continue, right, then the overall VOD would deal with it. Okay, this gave the community a larger number of individuals upon whom its quota of the tax could be divided. That's why they wanted more and more towns to be included in their region. So let's say I told you that, okay, say taxes for $1 million bodies, your area was responsible for 250,000 bodies. So you wanted as many towns included, so there would be more and more Jews trying to say, up your contribution. You're part of our greater region. In such matters, the judicial committee of the council was the final court. Okay. All right. In case of necessity, the Polish government enforced the council's decisions, but it's never a good idea to bring in, the secular, courts. But sometimes I felt they had no choice, so they would turn to them to help enforce a decision. Although all the decisions were arrived at according to Jewish, not Polish law, except sometimes they didn't have the clout to make sure, that certain decisions, were followed through. So then they would need the government to step in to make it a little more forceful. The Polish Jews lived in accordance with Talmudic law. We are so fragmented now as Jews, right? And so many, it used to be I always knew there were Orthodox Jews and conservative Jews and Reformed Jews, but boy, even within all these things, one ways of looking at Judaism. You can imagine this entire country, this huge, this will grow to be the largest Jewish population in the world. They all followed halacha. It's not going to be till the time period of the Haskalah, the later period, 18th, really 19th century for Eastern Europe. We're leave the fold, orthodoxy. But in those days, everybody follows the halacha. Consequently, they were deeply interested in its study for practical purposes, not just as an intellectual exercise. So, so think of those guys studying in the yeshiva and higher levels, and rabbanim. Um, these were the authorities you look to in regard to your entire lifestyle. It wasn't just what you do in college. Where can you carry? Where can't you carry? You know, it just your entire gestalt. You lived a total. I mean, those of us were Orthodox Jews. I mean, I don't differentiate between my Jewish self and my American self. I mean, I'm always guided. I mean, I'm always cognizant, right? That I'm Jewish, and my life is always evolving around the fact that I am Jewish. So it's only going to change starting more with that 18th, 19th century. Okay, so so I was trying to think when people would study, let's say in a yeshiva, you were studying it not just some intellectual exercise, it was for practical reasons. Certain situations arise, how should we deal with them? In our society. Nor did the Jewish community and its leadership in the council make any distinction between civil and religious law. It's Jewish law, it applies to everybody across the board. They realized that the life of the Jewish community depended on both aspects of Judaism. Behind everything else lay the necessity for Jewish education. And obviously, still to this day, how we really want people to be educated and to be educated Jews. The council made it its business to encourage and even insisted upon the establishment of schools and yeshivot in every town of a certain size. Obviously, a really tiny place. And they're certainly not going to have a yeshiva, but they, when we study more about Jewish education in Poland, you'll learn how they take care of that. If you wanted every child, right, to have a minimum, education, to be literate, to be able to open up a siddur and be able to daven or open up a chumash or study, on a lesser level than let's say yeshivas do. But everybody, they wanted everybody to be educated. They laid down rules for instruction. Again, what would you study, depending on the age, school, and they also ordered the strict enforcement of moral law. How you dress, right? How you protected yourself. I don't know, it was like an awful moral piece that they had in Jerusalem. I don't know. It sounds pretty horrendous. You don't know about these? No. They also have it. I know for sure in Jerusalem. I don't know about any other community. If in Mea Sharim, probably Geula, there is such a thing. Yeah. Because when I first learned about it, you ever read any of Naomi Reagan's books? I mean, she talks. So I remember at the time I was reading her book. What? I certainly never grew up with the knowledge of any such existence. But it's why I asked my daughter, who she thinks the most, I don't know, and she said, yes, it really does exist, of course. It's probably exists in New York also in certain areas, of course, but I have never come across them. All right. They also enforce the government's laws regarding the Jews. In other words, if a law would come down, they had no choice but to follow it. Maybe help me, hopefully you, to understand more. When the Nazis took over different communities, and they formed those huge ghettos, and then there was always a Jewish police, who were responsible. The Nazis didn't always want to get involved with day-to-day affairs, so there was the Jews around, and they had their own Jewish police, and it was a horrible dilemma for those people. I mean, they thought it was a way to help save their own personal families, so they had to follow whatever decisions the Nazis did. But believe you me, it was extremely problematic. I don't know, who are we to judge? I don't know. Yeah, I don't think we can. Okay, the government's laws, even in this is some of the laws were when they were actually even anti-Jewish, I had no choice but to enforce them. Such, for example, was the law forbidding the Jews to dress in expensive clothes. I never did my research. I never heard of it, but I guess so at a certain point. But I mean, who knows? Maybe this was at a certain time period. I don't know. Certainly there were plenty of wealthy people, so they're not all walking around schmuckers, so, but maybe with certain state occasions, what would wanted, their wealth. The councils of both Poland and Lithuania were strong central governments under which the Jews realized a considerable measure of cultural and religious autonomy. So it looks like for, these few hundred years, they're living a very good life in Poland. So we're going to change it at 1648, with Chmielnicki attacks and pogroms upon the Jewish people. But up until then, I mean, I did mention to you there are some attacks upon the Jews from time to time. Ugly comments were coming towards the way they were, but it wasn't like a whole scale attack upon the Jews of any particular, area. It would just be in little individuals. Actually, if you were the recipient, it wasn't so pleasant. I mean, people were killed, during those attacks. But again, smaller incidents. Okay, and then I just sort of said, unfortunately, their effectiveness was undermined by an avalanche of misfortunes that overwhelmed the Jews of Poland in the middle of the 17th century. I just added a few more things. Okay, when anybody had to deal with civil suits, that was called Dine Medina. Okay. It's that Pincus. That was the record book in which they wrote down, all the various decisions that the various leaders would have. Okay, I think so. We finished that area. So I wanted to give you just a lovely broad picture of a very beautiful and rich, Jewish community, by and large left alone, right, to live their own independent lives. The major interference would have had to do with tax. Okay, but that's unfortunately the case. But anything that they did internally, fine. The government really couldn't have care less. There definitely is anti-Semitism. Know the power of sermons. Not yet. That's later, much later. And you think of the Czar. Actually, that's how my Zeta came to America in 1907, because the Czar was after us, right? to join the army, so he escaped. I don't really know the full story how he escaped, but he did end up coming to America. That was it. They crossed borders clandestine. He was coming from Lithuania, so I don't know. I mean, he went back to visit his parents in 1914, got stuck there because World War I broke out. So he finally was able to escape. I think he went via Finland, and then eventually got a boat, whatever. Took him back all the way back to America. But for like a year, my grandma didn't know whether he was alive or dead, because you couldn't. Even there, the post office wasn't exactly running. So he would sometimes send like a letter somehow. I don't know if these got through to certain Rav, let's say in America, with certain allusions in it. You have to be a learned person to understand what he's saying, but realize that he was alive. And this was towards the end of the year to say he was on his way back. So I think we concluded there. Now you have a nice broad picture of what life might be in Poland, and we still have a little time. So we're going to do the next week to talk about Jewish learning. How it becomes relevant. So let's do that. Okay. So if you have a sheet that says Jewish learning in Poland and Lithuania, okay, and 15th to 17th century, because over time it developed. Okay, so during the 16th century, there wrote, are you with me? Did you have that sheet? I think I gave it out last week. I do have, and I gave some additional ones. Huh? You know? Yes. Oh, right. You don't have it. I always recommend it, if you'd like to save these, to buy yourselves a folder and then just keep them in the folder. Look at Barbara. She's so well organized. You have a lovely folder. And she just puts it there. So it's great. All right. So again, during the 16th century, there rose a whole number of great rabbinic authorities, of which we will discuss in greater detail. It'll be a separate lecture. They helped lay the foundation for the learning which was to characterize Polish Jewry until modern. In the 12th and 13th centuries, Russian and Polish Jewish students had gone to Austria, Bohemia, and Germany, even to Spain to study. All right. So because those great yeshivas, which we were going to learn, they didn't exist. First of all, the Jewish population was much smaller then. Probably takes up all their energy just for living, surviving. So if it was a boy, a promising, a student who's very eager to learn, he would have had to go westward, right, to find a place to study. However, due to the calamities which were falling thick and fast upon the Jews of Western Europe, Polish Jewry had to become increasingly self-reliant. It was aided in this by the large immigration of Jews from Germany. So, like, if you could ever, it's hard to do it, but if you could do a genealogical research, okay, let's say you came from your grandparents, great-grandparents came from Poland, but where did they came from? Someplace, so you would find a lot of them would be German, except I told you some of those Crimean Jews, from the south. But it'd be fascinating. I don't know my data figure. We do have a family tree. I can't even read it, but you can see he traces, into Germany and into France. It's really quite interesting. And he has it so all the way back there. It's just around. Okay. There were three great rabbis. I'll talk about it later time, who were connected with the rise of Jewish learning. One was this Rabbi because he was crucial in the development of that vase, so he was the rabbi of Lublin, and later that entire province was Salish. Rabbi Moshe Israelis, I'm sure you've heard of him. He was head of the yeshiva in Krakow, and became the most famous Ashkenazic rabbinic authority throughout the Jewish world. And also this, we'll learn more about him, Rabbi Shlomo Luria of Posen, who wrote a very important commentary on a number of Talmudic tractates. And these three began the growth of the intellectual structure of Polish Jewry. I'm going to mention more. I'm going to start actually with Yaakov Palin, and I'll tell you, more about him. But then we'll go to Shachman and some of these others. How are we doing, Talmud? A little bit more. By the 16th century, few Talmudic academies could be found in Germany. The conditions were so awful there, and they were constantly, being harangued by the German authorities. I told you, Germany at this point is not unified. It doesn't happen in the 19th century under Bismarck. And Jews would live in one area, and then they fell from there, had to go to another area, and then, okay, you were allowed back, but only certain numbers would come back, and it was just awful. So, even education, everything's been constantly, broken apart. And so that's what will be the impetus to set up those yeshivas, which became very great yeshivas in Poland. 2 or 3 centuries previously, there had hardly been important talent. In other words, it's about Germany. It became like the key center for Ashkenazic Jewry. Remember, the Spanish Jews, Portuguese Jews, fell 1492. Majority go to the Ottoman Empire, but some go to Italy. Then went to Holland and England, and then the New World. but I wouldn't say there was tremendous high learning, for part of the Ottoman Empire. But the key center would have been Germany, but now it's all going to shift to Poland. Okay, now it was the Slavic lands, especially Poland, that could boast of the most famous yeshivas. The yeshivot were not schools to train rabbis. Isn't it interesting? That was not their main aim. Most of the students attended them because it was expected of them to attain higher learning in the study of Talmud. Now, obviously, certain people came out of there and did become rabbis. These would be like top students. But every mother and father wanted their son to have the capability to study in the and to know Jewish and to know how to guide their lives, in an intelligent way based on their education. If a student showed the slightest inclination of excellence to how gladly contributed to his support. Because obviously not everybody's welcome, many people, So we need to have something like that here in the US because Jewish education is out of sight. I mean, how expensive it is. And I don't know. They talk about it a lot, but it seems to be able to solve it. Thus, the entire population was raised to a high intellectual level. Neither medieval Germany nor Islamic Spain had witnessed the like. So even though obviously were very well educated Jews in Spain, right, and in let's say Germany, but not to the it didn't cover a range, of ages of the population as it will develop in Poland. So to this day, obviously we take great pride in well educated. Obviously, not everybody opts for yeshiva education, but they do want to, go like college or graduate school. That's like a big deal in our Jewish families. It will just go on a little bit more, and then we'll pause. The study of Talmud became a means of satisfying the people's intellectual hunger. So now that I'm doing Daf Yomi, believe me, I can't follow it. But whoa, this Rav is saying this, and that Rav is saying this, and there's another Rav has it. And they all have proofs of why they have their opinion. So, you really have to know a lot. If you're studying Gemara, you really have to have a very broad, Jewish knowledge. And as in each generation, more and more, key rabbonim come and publish. Well, there's so much to constantly be studying. I mean, it's your whole life, right? Well, are we okay? We're not going to school anymore, but we still have a thirst for knowledge to increase, our knowledge, particularly, Jewish circles. Kilpul used already to some extent in the Babylonian yeshiva. It's sort of by its nature. Gemara is like Kilpul, and it is because it's bringing up so many different arguments with proofs. So that's what a Kilpul is. This Rabbi Yaakov Karl, who I'm going to talk about next week, he's known as the key founder of that means of study of Kilpul. It became the popular method of studying Talmud in Poland. The object was to sharpen the minds of the students so that he might see deeper into the difficult arguments of the Talmudic text. I remember, I mean, I find that Gemara confusing. I can't always follow their arguments. Kilpul enabled a man to display his knowledge, right, and keenness of mind. However, many of the notable rabbis of Poland, including Rabbi Solomon Luria, objected to extreme Kilpul, sort of like show-offy. I'm more brilliant than you. I can come up with more arguments, with you, more proofs. The abler heads of the yeshiva knew how to keep this method of study within bounds. Still, it became a characteristic method of study in most Polish yeshivot. So we'll do more. We'll finish this up next week, and then I'm going to start telling you about certain key rabbonim and how they influence us down to the church. Okay, my pleasure. Good to see you all. Well. By the way, I am telling you in advance, because I had awful coming here, I avoid Lyons Road, you know, at least the part from where I live going in that awful, awful. I literally had to turn around. I mean, I left so early today, you know, and I don't know what to do here. I mean, work or some, you know. Which what? I do my own. I used to listen. But no, I like to do it on my own because I'm finding it so confusing. If I can go as slow as I need to try to absorb it, so can't always absorb it. But you know that's I started off trying to listen to other people. I don't like it. Whatever I can get on my own. You know, and obviously I use the art scroll, which is in English. I do not read it. And I mean it's fascinating just to learn all these, you know, or to know that these, you know, right now it's in the dark.